Back. It's great to see a full room here for our today's meeting. This is meeting number 51 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food. I'm going to start with just a few reminders. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format, and the proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. Just so you're aware, the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. And of course, screenshots or taking of photos of your screen are not permitted, and that my understanding is that also includes those who are in the room. Please, no photos during our proceedings. Again, my understanding, we have a great crowd in here tonight. If you're not able to get access to a headset, our apologies. We're doing our best, but for those that do have access, you're able to grab your instrument there to be able to make that happen accordingly, and this fine gentleman will help you out if you need it. Colleagues, we are pursuant to Standing Order 108-2 and the motion adopted by the committee on Wednesday, October 5th, 2022, the committee is resuming its study of food price inflation, and I'd now like to welcome our witnesses for the first 1 hour panel. With us in person today, we have from the Dairy Processors Association of Canada, Matthew Frigon, who is the President and Chief Executive Officer. And joining online is Philip Vanderpool, who is the Chair of the Board of Directors. Welcome to you both. From Food and Beverage Canada, we have James Donaldson, who serves as the Chief Executive Officer of the BC Food and Beverage Organization. And from Maple Leaf Foods Incorporated, we have Michael McCain, Executive Chair of the Board and Chief Executive Officer. To all our witnesses, thank you so much for taking the time to be here, and we look forward to hearing from you. The way this will work is we'll have 5 minutes opening remarks for each organization, and then we'll turn it over to questions from our colleagues. I'm going to start with Dairy Processors Association of Canada. You have up to 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the invitation today to discuss Dairy Processors' view on food inflation in our country. As you mentioned, I'm the board chair of the Dairy Processors Association of Canada, as well as the president and CEO of Vitalis Nutrition. With me today is Matthew Frigon, president and CEO of DPAC. DPAC represents more than 90% of the milk processed into dairy products in Canada. There are two key areas we would like to discuss with you today from the perspective of the dairy processing industry. We would first like to discuss the inflationary factors affecting our industry, and secondly, the importance of a grocery code of conduct to promote contractual certainty and fair trading throughout the grocery supply chain. As you know, the causes of inflation are multifactored. Geopolitical pressures, weather-related events, and the pandemic with the associated macroeconomic stimulus all played a role. In dairy processing between 2020 and 2023, the cost of raw milk increased by 10.6%. The cost of energy has more than doubled. Packaging and material rose by 24%, while the cost of machinery and labor increased by more than 10%. Dairy processors strive to make efficiency gains and work to mitigate the impacts affecting customers and consumers. But with cost increases of this magnitude, it is obvious that costs have had to be passed down the supply chain. Statistics Canada data shows that price change for dairy products sold by Canadian processors increased by 9.5% from 2020 to 2022, which is still below the inflation cost pressure faced by dairy processors over the same time period. For reference, the average profitability of dairy processors as a sector has for many years been lagging the average of all CPG manufacturers in Canada. The factors that have been at play in Canada have also been seen in the US. If we compare the evolution of the price of dairy products at retail in Canada and the US between 2020 and 2022, we see that dairy products overall have increased by 11.7% in Canada, while prices have risen 13.6% in the US. Looking at the last 10 years, the inflation on dairy products in Canada has been less than half that of the other foods at retail. Food prices have risen by 27%, while the price of dairy products has increased by 11%. Cost, including farm milk prices, has definitely risen more than 11% in the dairy sector. So the 11% increase in dairy retail prices over the last 10 years reflects the efficiency gains that have been taken place in the dairy supply chain over that time period, most notably at the dairy processing level. I will now have Matthew Frigon, President and CEO, speak on the Grocery Code of Conduct.
Avec d'autres, je vais y aller en français.
I'm going to say this in French. With other industry associations that have appeared before this committee, DPAC is part of the steering committee working at developing a grocery code of conduct. We cannot overemphasize the importance of a code of conduct for the grocery sector in Canada and improving trust and collaboration throughout the supply chain. The code aims to bring transparency and contractual certainty to business relations within the industry through clear agreements and terms for appropriate payments and fees. The code will ensure that farmers, processors, wholesalers, and large and small retailers follow professional standards of ethics and ensure fair dealings across the value chain. The code is more than a written document that encourages good behavior, as it also aims to establish a dispute resolution process that will allow a timely resolution of commercial disputes between suppliers and retailers if these cannot be resolved by the parties themselves. Importantly, the code should be business-friendly, meaning it should be clear and simple rather than including overly detailed rules and burdensome processes. The goal is to increase efficiency by reducing bureaucracy, not the other way around. My association is of the view that the code should be mandatory and enforceable so that it truly makes a difference in driving true, meaningful collaboration to make the supply chain more efficient and more effective in responding to changing consumer demands. In conclusion, the dairy processing industry has been a strong contributor to Canada's economy, and we believe that the inflationary pressures we have faced in the last several years have been mitigated through efficiency gains at the processing level to the greatest extent possible. A grocery code of conduct will make the grocery sector be more efficient and resilient and better equipped to face challenges in the future. Thank you again for your time and consideration on this important topic. We welcome any questions you may have. Thank you very much, Mr. Frigon and Mr. Vanderpool, for your opening remarks. Now we have Mr. Donaldson for 5 minutes, please.
Yes, thank you, and good evening, committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this evening. My name is James Donaldson. As it was mentioned, I'm CEO of BC Food and Beverage, an industry association supporting the food and beverage industry in BC. I'm also Vice Chair of Food and Beverage Canada, a national industry association formed by Canada's provincial food and beverage associations, representing over 1,000 food and beverage manufacturers. There are almost 8,000 food and beverage manufacturing establishments in Canada, the majority of which are small and medium-sized businesses who employ 300,000 people. Despite the average or small size of business in the industry, it's also our country's largest manufacturing sector, in addition to being an essential service. Processors are the largest purchaser of Canadian agricultural products, and as a result, the long-term success of both sectors are intertwined. Inflation is something that every Canadian has had to deal with in all aspects of their life, and obviously food price inflation is no exception. Escalating food prices are highly visible as groceries are purchased at least once per week in Canada. The other challenge is that food is essential. Some of the drivers of this are beyond our control, such as the war in Ukraine, droughts which have impacted many crops in North America, the pandemic, and global supply chain disruptions. But that makes it imperative that Canada focus on the issues that are within its control to ensure a stable and competitive industry. In recent months, there's been a lot of talk in the media about grocery retail business practices, which is an issue I'll touch on in a moment. But the causes of food inflation are a lot broader than that. Labor challenges, transportation costs, ingredient costs, packaging material costs, pallet costs, the cost of feed, the cost of manure and fertilizer. There's been a rise throughout the supply chain. In exploring solutions to these challenges, we need to start to look at the entire food system, which is especially critical in a country with such a large landmass and a small population. A food system is like an ecosystem. It works seamlessly when it's in balance. Right now, it's out of balance and it's putting our industry at risk. Processors have unique challenges versus other components of the supply chain. While rising costs have impacted everyone, including retailers and food service distributors, other stakeholders in the supply chain have the ability to pass those costs on to their customers, except our industry. Processors have had to absorb increased ingredient costs up to 40%, freight costs up to 400%, particularly in BC during the flood crisis. They've skyrocketed due to the imbalance between the companies providing the food and Canada's largest retailers. It's difficult and at times impossible to pass those costs on through pricing due to blackout periods and flat-out rejections by some retailers. This, coupled with the excessive fees and fines administered by retailers, which cannot be passed on, and the inability to even negotiate them, is impacting our industry's ability to compete. Essentially, Canada's processors are getting squeezed from both sides, and it's not sustainable. Small to mid-sized processors who comprise most of the industry don't have the resources and cash flow to withstand these challenges on a continuous basis. We've heard some of the past testimony from retailers who cited that processor margins were stable, with examples such as Pepsi, Procter & Gamble, and Kraft. Those are not typical examples as they are not reflective of the majority of industry in Canada. We've also seen them try to shift focus from their record profits to their low margin percentage. Sadly, I can tell you that of the processors we've spoken to, even with the good fortune of experiencing top line growth, have struggled with eroding margins. The average processor does not have the luxury of rejecting price increases for their suppliers, or to charge them fees and levies with no backup or prior notice. I just wanted to point out this is not a high margin industry to begin with. So I'd like to make the following recommendations for your consideration. So one is the need to focus on industry competitiveness, capacity, and resiliency. There's a lot of important work that's already been done in recent years, such as the Agri-Food Economic Strategy Table and Supply Chain Task Force. We ask that this important work be revisited and implemented to move us to a more competitive position locally and globally. Also, to work with industry to resolve its labor challenges. Continuing to work to support industry labor initiatives such as the National Workforce Strategy for Agriculture and Food and Beverage Manufacturing and the Achieving Our Workforce Destination programs. Creating a clear and faster track to permanent residence for foreign workers. Third, to support further investment and funding in technology and automation for food and beverage manufacturers. According to Canadian Agri-Food Policy Institute, food and beverage manufacturers are underinvested in advanced manufacturing relative to other manufacturing sectors and relative to other countries, so we're falling behind. Investment in automation technology modernization is critical for our industry to control costs, mitigate labor risk, and to scale and grow. Most of the innovation and technology grants provided by government are not applicable to food and beverage companies. So we need to revisit a broader definition of innovation to allow our industry better access to grant funding and dedicated funding programs for the food and beverage sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Donaldson. We'll now turn it over to Mr. McCain. But Mr. McCain is the sole Atlantic Canadian Member of Parliament on this committee. Let me just say and recognize, appreciate your work and your family's legacy in Atlantic Canada, indeed across the country, from a business sense and also from the investments that you've made on the social side. Thank you for accepting our invitation, and the floor is yours for up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, and good evening, Mr. Chair and committee members. I'm Michael McCain, CEO of Maple Leaf Foods. Maple Leaf is one of Canada's leading meat and plant-based food processors, and we employ over 14,000 people in Canada and the United States. We are pursuing a bold vision to be the most sustainable protein company on earth, and in 2019 we became the world's first, I emphasize world's first, scale food company to be carbon neutral now. Here's what I intend to address in my remarks. Number one, the challenge of food inflation. Number two, the root causes. And number three, some suggestions that we have on policy considerations going forward. I happen to be old enough to have lived through previous periods of high inflation. Fortunately, in the past 30 years, most industrialized countries have benefited from stable inflationary conditions. Induced by macroeconomic factors connected to the pandemic, Canada is now facing, as you know, inflation rates close to 7%. The good news is that it appears to be abating, although not going away yet. Because of other macro factors, in addition to extreme sensitivity to global supply chains, food inflation has been running over 10%. For comparison, on the other hand, food inflation in the UK and the EU have been over 16%. As you know, this is having a very significant impact on Canadians. Research conducted by the Maple Leaf Centre for Food Security found that 1/4 of Canadians are very concerned about their ability to feed themselves, a rate that has doubled in 2 years. 62% of Canadians rank the rising price of essentials as their number one concern. Food insecurity was a serious issue before the pandemic. Now, reports from food banks show that the rising cost of living is forcing even more people to resort to emergency food relief to put food on the table. This is a serious problem that needs structural solutions and not food charity. Our Centre for Food Security is working collaboratively to reduce food insecurity by 50% by 2030. We do this through funding innovative projects, advocating for a stronger social safety net, and bringing together those on the ground to advance change. I hope this committee's focus on food access and affordability stimulates a broader discussion and action on food insecurity. We need every voice on the table behind this. Many witnesses have appeared before you to discuss the root causes of food inflation. We would start with the central observation that this is not a Canadian problem. It's a global problem with inflation rates that are at or above our own. There are three overwhelming root causes. Number one, supply chain instability, including labor availability. Number two, the war in Ukraine. And number three, general inflation. Food production operates in a global supply chain. This global supply chain reduces the cost of food day in and day out. It's a delicate, operationally sensitive supply chain, and the unprecedented impacts of the post-pandemic economy have been profound. Transportation costs ballooned, supply became unreliable, and labor availability constricted. While it is getting better, it is not fully recovered. The grain complex, multi-year price charts, which weaves its way into most every food cost in some way or another, illustrates the rapid rises experienced in these markets, exacerbated by the supply chain restrictions threatened or imposed due to the war in the Ukraine. And finally, general inflation has shown up across the food chain. Everything from supplies, ocean freight rates, capital costs, packaging, and everything else all contribute to the most turbulent market conditions I've experienced in my 40-plus years in the food industry. The profit margins of any food participant in the food value chain are pennies on the dollar. In our case, spiraling inflation and market volatility have been a massive headwind. In the first 3 quarters of 2022, our adjusted operating earnings declined 60 to 70% compared to 2021. Our margins compressed materially as we tried to keep up. Of course, this is unsustainable, and we have no choice but to pass on higher cost inputs, but always in the context of highly price competitive markets regionally, nationally, and internationally, with an open border for food imports, including from U.S. meat processors that are over 10 times our size. The food industry has an important role in supporting food affordability. We meet that responsibility by operating as efficiently as we possibly can, by providing consumers choice in the marketplace, and by investing in scale and technology to ensure our productivity is world-class. Food inflation and inflation in general is, simply put, a global problem. There's little any of us can do in the room to modify or control that. Governments and public policy can, however, play a role in addressing the consequences of food inflation and building a better food system. Our recommendations would include, number one, focusing on fiscal discipline to restrain overall inflation. Number two, addressing historic labor shortages, including modernizing immigration systems, addressing skills gaps and mobility issues. Number three, setting a goal to reduce food insecurity by 50% by 2030, just as our centre has, enlisting support from the civil society and the private sector. And finally, building a focus on productivity and competitiveness in our economy, including regulatory competitiveness. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for this opportunity, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Mr. McCain. We're going to get right to questions. We're going to start with the Conservatives, and we're over to Mr. Liu for 6 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci beaucoup aux témoins.
Thank you for being among us tonight. My first question is for the Dairy Processors Association of Canada. What link do you make between the code of conduct that you spoke about early on in your speaker's notes and your industry as a whole, briefly? Thank you for your question. The best way for governments to help us with regards to inflation is to be more efficient. The code of conduct for grocery stores would do that. It will improve collaboration between different parts of this sector, the link to inflation is probably indirect between the code of conduct and inflation, but it will help to improve the supply chain's efficiency. And why do you think that it should be mandatory and not voluntary? If it's optional, you don't think that we will reach the goals that you mentioned? We do prefer something that is obligatory in order to make sure that the code's goals are met. What obstacles do you foresee? Well, we currently work well with other parts of the sector, and there are consultations that will start soon. There has been very good collaboration thus far. So the coming months will be very busy. You talked about the economic contribution being very big. According to you, when you spread out the cost of the product that is on the shelves, would you say that the third is the distributors, a third is the vendor, and a third is the producer? Well, it really depends on the product. I can only speak for dairy products. Of course, there's pasteurization, and maybe the producer will get a little bit less than a third of the cost. But when we look at the adjusted value, globally though, do you think that with all products it's spread out relatively equally? Because if there's no producer, then there's no distributor. How do you see this aspect? Do you think that transformation is the most important, but then there's also the producer and the vendor? Should it be more equal with regards to how the money is divided? And yes, I do think that the code of conduct will help with that when I talked about the collaboration among these different parties. And also there were some studies in the UK. The consumer will be benefiting from this. In the UK, there is now a code of conduct. And to answer your question, everybody has to come out of this a winner, including the consumers. I imagine that there are all kinds of businesses, small, medium, large ones. When you go on bigger markets, does a medium-sized business find what it's looking for? It's hard for all businesses, but of course with the smaller and medium-sized businesses with regards to inflation, the relationships are not the best. There are specific issues that they are facing. You mentioned from the get-go that the increase of the price of goods in the United States is higher than in Canada. So if we look at it globally, there are some positive sides to the Canadian system for the dairy industry. As Mr. McCain said, this is an international phenomenon. It's not Canadian. I'm speaking of inflation here. There have been increases of dairy product prices in Canada as well. When we're told that some of Canada's systems don't encourage good prices for the consumer, but we look at the prices, we see something different. Well, with regards to inflation, I would say that it's a different story. Thank you, Mr. Frigon. Mr. McCain, you talked a lot about the importance of the workforce. You said that we need to reduce the red tape? What kind of system do you foresee where we can have better people coming, more foreign workers coming in?
Unfortunately, we're at time, but I do want, if you want to have a quick response.
If I understood the question properly, you're asking what kind of regulatory change would be required I think there's the bureaucratic obstacles to the foreign worker program, for example, have been acute for us, and we would see just opening up the aperture of that would be very helpful.
Thank you very much. We'll now turn to Mr. Drouin, up to 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all of the witnesses for being here today. I don't want to point the finger to any industry more than any other, but we are here because we do have questions coming from our constituents. People are worried, and it's been mentioned in the industry that there is indeed food inflation. More Canadians are depending on our food banks than before. First question for Mr. Frigon. You speak to your members. The relationship between supermarkets and processors, is that a good relationship? Do your members say that they are satisfied with the negotiations? For example, if your members foresee an increase in prices, they of course have to offset those costs by sending them off to the retailers. Do you think that that's a good relationship, or do you really need the code of conduct that you have been speaking about from the beginning? I would say that generally speaking, and of course it depends on certain things, but it's not a very good relationship, and that's why we want a code of conduct for grocery stores in order to improve that relationship between all of these stakeholders. It's not just the producers who deliver the goods to distributors, but also other producers with their farmers. We need this code because the relationship could be improved. With the chips sector, with PepsiCo and Loblaws, at some point there were some products or brand products that were unavailable on the shelves. Do some of your members go through the same thing? Maybe it's a bit more specific, maybe some cheese producers. Might be a more specific sector, but do you hear these kinds of stories? Maybe some grocery stores refuse to put their products on their shelves because the negotiation is unequal. I would say that it is definitely a similar issue. It's not something that we discuss about as a group, but one-on-one, there are definitely anecdotes that we hear and stories that we hear. The example that you have just given, I have definitely heard such things. You've surely seen what's happened with the Code of Conduct in England. Has the result of this Code of Conduct been to increase the prices at the retailers in an exorbitant way, or has it equalized prices? We compared inflation in the UK to here, so before the COVID period, because it has changed a lot. So we're talking about 2012 to 2020. Inflation in countries where there was a code of conduct was a lot lower than in Canada. This demonstrates that a code of conduct will not increase prices. As I said earlier on, it increases efficiency because everybody works together. And the best evidence of that is that everybody in the UK, or the producers now, support the code and everybody is satisfied. I mentioned earlier that the Competition Bureau made conducted a study in the UK. It was a very big study, I think in 2008, and they were the ones who recommended action. They said that if things continued as they were, the consumer would ultimately be the one to pay the price. That is the study that kickstarted this process to implement a code of conduct.
Before committee, and I know you've provided 3 recommendations, and like Mr. Lehoux, I'm going to ask you about monetizing the. I think you've mentioned the temporary foreign worker program, but even as obviously you're looking at how do I increase capacity within your own manufacturing sector and processing sector. Are you looking at automation to provide that lack of labor? And lack of labor is not unique to Canada. It's an issue in the U.S. When I talk to politicians there, it's an issue in most developed worlds in the food processing sector. How do we attract more talent in the food processing sector? And can automation solve that problem?
I think our industry has frontline roles that are, not necessarily in the first instance the most attractive. I think people they gain attraction and affinity for the roles once inside the industry, but in the first instance, they're not necessarily. Our compensation programs are very competitive. I think it's simply access to an available pool of people to fill the vacuum that's been created in the last 2 years, particularly, and it's really over the course of the last 2 years where that vacuum has been created. The challenges that we have is not lack of capacity. We have actually oodles of capacity. In fact, our industry in Canada, ours specifically, is operating underutilized capacity. And we have challenges around raw material supply, livestock, and people. And I think there's lots can be done to accelerate that.
I'll have to leave it at that. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. McCain. Thank you, Mr. Drouin. Maintenant, Monsieur Parent pour 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci.
Mr. Perron for 6 minutes. Thank you for being with us tonight. Mr. Frigon, I would like you to explain the following. Francis was talking about negotiations, the relationships with retailers. We're talking about those things a lot, very much lately. How do you fix prices when you're talking to a retailer? As I said, this is not something that we are involved with regards to retailers. With the farms, as you know, that is a regulated price. So the producer, the dairy producer, is purchasing in a fully regulated market with a price that the Canadian Milk Commission has set, and they sell in a market where things are not regulated. It's case by case. Individual producers negotiate with retailers and distributors. So the code would fill this gap, if I've understood correctly. When there is an increase in price with regards to your input, and your members want to, of course, minimally transmit a part of that or offset a part of that cost or that inflationary cost, can they do that to the retailer? Some retailers have told us that during certain periods of time they froze prices. Is that something that some of your members have gone through? There's a study that our law firm has done. I was not involved. There was some confidentiality, but that was an issue that was brought up. It is challenging to offset regulated prices off to retailers. The code will not regulate prices as such. It will, however, when it comes to contractual certainty, collaboration, and these kinds of things, it will help the code's goal is to improve relationships, diminish red tape, and that is where it will help. It's not about regulating the price at which producers are selling. What exactly are you talking about? You're talking about programs and various fees? Yes. Sometimes we get the sense that those kinds of programs are funded by suppliers. Mr. Frigon, I'm having a bit of trouble understanding because you're saying that we can't offset or pass off the part of the costs to others, but retailers are telling us that they have no choice but to offset the prices. The inflation is being blamed on the supply chain. I'm going to talk like an economist. We have to separate the periods. There was a period from 2012 to 2020 where there was almost no increase with milk at a retail price, and neither with the input costs. But since the pandemic, it has been different. There have been increases, and StatsCan data demonstrates that the retail price has also, or the bulk price has also changed. Dairy producers are selling at a different price to their clients, and that reflects the increase of costs in the last 2 years. But in the period before, it was very different. So quickly, previous witnesses have told us to maybe do an investigation with the Competition Bureau with regards to fixing of prices. Right now, there is a consultation from the Competition Bureau. It's a bit wider than that. Maybe the law can be amended, and that is something we would participate in. Mr. McCain, you, of course, are at the head of a very large company. Do you encounter the same kinds of problems with regards to retailers imposing fees, difficulties of getting in increasing prices and that kind of thing?
I've been selling to the retail market since 1979, just short of 45 years, in every major market around the world. I started my career as a retail salesman. The challenging of selling into a retail distribution system, a food service distribution system in Toronto, in New York, in London, or Sydney, Australia, is the same. It's always challenging, whether you're selling food, jewelry, clothing, or any other product into a distribution system. And they demand a lot on behalf of their consumers and others and their own improvements. We are completely, it's just the reality of the business that we're in. And experienced people know how to deal with that. And you manage that. That's what you do. That's just the business we're in. It's like I would describe as economic gravity. It can't change it. It is what it is. Been that way for 50 years. Will probably be that way for another 50 years. And I'm totally fine with it. I've experienced and sold products in jurisdictions with code of conduct, and I've sold products in jurisdictions without a code of conduct. We are completely agnostic to that. The truth be told, I think it'll have absolutely no impact on our business or anybody else's business or the consumer outcome. But if the industry wants to take it and put it in, we certainly have sold lots of products in the UK with a code of conduct, and same as we have in the United States, same as we have here, and completely, utterly agnostic from our perspective, just the way it is.
We'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. McCain. Thank you, Mr. Perron. We now have Mr. McGregor for up to 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I'd also like to extend my thank you to all of our witnesses for appearing before our committee today and helping guide us through this important study. I think it was made mention in the opening comments that this is a very sensitive issue. I think Mr. Drouin made mention of the fact that we are hearing from our constituents, because our constituents, this is a necessary item for their families to get by week. That's the thing that unites us all, is that everybody eats. And certainly the people in my area out here on Vancouver Island, it's a painful experience every time they're going to the grocery store. One of our previous witnesses was Dr. Jim Stanford. But he very helpfully provided the committee with a brief that showed the doubling of food retail profit since the pandemic, the pre-pandemic, that would have been 2019. The fact that food retail margins have soared, and that these are both happening at a time when real supermarket sales volumes have actually been declining. And I just saw his Twitter feed. He just saw that the Q4 information for last year was just reported, and that the food retail margins of the grocers went up yet again. So, Mr. Vanderpool, I'd like to start with you and Deepak. You did make mention of the fact that, for processors, the average profitability has been lagging other sectors. I guess because of the nature of Canada's concentrated grocery retail sector, I mean, the fact that 3 companies, Empire, Loblaw, and Metro, control so much, we have definitely heard a lot of testimony about the need for a grocery code of conduct. But I want to get a little bit more of a sense of what it's been like for some of your smaller and medium-sized enterprises, like the hurdles they face when they are trying to negotiate with a company that has that much market dominance and that much power that it can bring to bear. Because I think that's the crux of the matter, is the inequality that exists between the two sectors here.
Thank you, Mr. McGregor. As you know, there are 2 very different business models between the processors and the retailers. We're really in the business of investing in machinery and equipment and plants to process raw material into finished food products ready for consumption. Retailers are really in the business of investing in space and location to buy products to distribute and sell to consumers. So I know a lot of numbers are thrown out about comparisons of profit margins, and I think we look at it more like you have to look at maybe at different metrics of profit per dollar of total capital invested. That one may even not be perfect. Maybe a better definition than profit margin is to look at the cash cycle or free cash flow. And that's where, as my comment said earlier, processors have struggled. We typically don't have the scale of some processors, for instance, in the United States. So the return that ultimately results in free cash flow is squeezed, and therefore it's harder to make new investments to get even more efficiency or automation, things like that. So that's where we've been struggling as processors. We need to do that, but it's hard to get that return on those type of investments.
And it was made mention that I think by you, Mr. Donaldson, this is a nice segue to turn to you, that you're kind of caught in the middle because, farmers have their input costs. They, what it takes to grow a certain product or produce a product from a certain animal, they have to sell that to you. But then you're negotiating then with a large retail giant who may just state, well, we're buying it at this price. Again, I guess the same theme is, I really want to focus on the fact, the situation of your smaller and medium-sized enterprises. I mean, you made mention of the fact that we've got over 8,000 businesses in Canada, and that's fantastic to see. I want to see more of those particular companies succeed. But again, I guess, like, anecdotally, what have you been hearing from your members, what it's like for them to negotiate with grocery retail giants that have such a command and control over that size of the market?
Yeah, thank you for your question. It's certainly been very difficult. And, in BC, we don't really have any, we don't have any really large companies. We don't have any big multinationals. Even as I always say, even the big companies in BC are relatively small in the national scope. Yeah, they're finding it very difficult. I talked to a member last week who, over the last 4 years, has actually almost tripled their top line growth, but their margin has shrunk by 25%. And so they're happy to have that expanded distribution and an expansion, not just in Canada but into other markets. But for the smaller sort of entrepreneurial businesses that make up the bulk of our membership, it's almost impossible. They have there's extended blackout periods. Even when you're trying to negotiate a price increase, it could take several months to negotiate. Not honoring payment terms. If you're a small business and you have an agreement for net 15 to get paid and it takes 60 to 90 days. I mean, a large retailer can hold back on that money, and they're making millions of dollars on interest. But with small businesses, that's the risk they have. Is I always use the adage that processing industry, it's sort of not any one or two things that gets you. It's sort of the death by 1,000 cuts. And well, small processors don't even have the luxury of withstanding 1,000 cuts. They might have 30 or 40. So when they don't get paid on time, that can really risk their fees, their viability, their very viability, their ability to pay their employees. And then sometimes the fees and the charges. I think probably the most frustrating thing that I've been hearing from our members is that they don't have these issues if they're big enough to start exporting and going to the U.S. U.S. retailers, they're not giving them all the program spends and fees and fines and retroactive payments adjustments where they're supposed to be getting a check and they have $50,000-$60,000 taken off for some retroactive adjustment that they made from 2 or 3 years ago. It's impossible to sort of even account for those and plan for them. I think that makes it even harder. You have to really keep things very lean and have very clear understanding of your cost centers. So when the goalposts keep moving, when you don't know when you're going to get paid or how much you're going to get paid or how long it will take to get paid, it's very, very hard to withstand that. I did also just want to say, I ran out of time in my speaking notes that I shared. I did have a couple of comments about the code of conduct, but it's not.
Mr. Donaldson, I apologize. I gave you a fair amount of runway, and Mr. McGregor, in the interest, I've been trying to be pretty generous, but unfortunately, I can't give you any more runway. Thank you, Mr. McGregor. Thank you, Mr. Donaldson. Colleagues, we're going to go to our second round. We started a little bit late. I've got 15 minutes left that I'll grant to our last folks, but I will be really tight. I'll be shutting it off at 5 minutes. No more leeway. Mr. Steinley, over to you for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here this evening. I was going to have a few dairy questions because I'm a dairy farmer at heart. I grew up on a dairy farm in southwest Saskatchewan. But Mr. McCain, you brought up a few things that I like to delve a little further into. And first and foremost, what is the difference between your transportation costs and your plants in the States compared to your plants in Canada?
It's very challenging to compare them because they're product specific, they're customer specific. Our product mix, our customer mix in Canada, a big chunk of our product coming out of Manitoba, for example, is exported. It's mostly containerized. That includes an ocean freight component that's incomparable to products sold out of central Canada. It's our plant-based business. It's incomparable.
But your trucking costs would be like just freight on trucks. What would the trucking cost comparison be?
Comparable.
Okay. In 2019, you decided, Maple Leaf Foods decided to open a plant or invest in a plant in Shelbyville, Indiana, instead of investing in a plant in Canada. Can you tell me what went into that decision and what would say maybe some of the taxes, some of the incentives, why you decided to invest in Shelbyville, Indiana, instead of in a plant in Canada, especially with the pulse, because I would believe there'd be more opportunity to have access to pulse crops in Canada? Or?
No. 95% of the business was in the United States. It's not a Canadian business. It was a U.S. business. 95%, maybe 98%. So, and the economics of the plant-based protein business are about outbound freight, not inbound freight. And the outbound freight we located in Indiana because it was dab smack in the middle of our market. So, I mean, the freight economics were just kept black and white. That was the logical place to locate it.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. You said in some of your comments that this is a worldwide phenomena in inflation, but your 3 recommendations are very much within the federal government bailiwick. It was fiscal discipline, labor, and you talked about labor again in a subsequent question, and bureaucratic obstacles. So a few people have talked about it's a made in Canada phenomena with inflation, and your 3 recommendations focus on issues that this federal government could tackle if there was a political will. So in your opening comment, you said it was more of a world phenomena, but how come your recommendations focus strictly on a made in Canada situation, especially around the fiscal discipline and making sure that you could get inflation under control if we had that fiscal discipline?
My recommendations in public policy would be focused on the things that we can control, less than the things that we can't control. Those are a few things that we can control. With respect to fiscal discipline, I think that should obviously be done in the context of global economies. With respect to labor, I think that is something that is completely within our control, and we can assist in that vein. And regulatory competitiveness is something that governments for the last 20 years should have focused more on, and in the next 20 years, I think should focus more on.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. One thing I would ask, and I got a minute and a half left, 2 more questions. One, when it comes to your biggest concern around competitiveness in Canada, what would be one of your biggest concerns? Labor is one of them. What about the tax regulatory system? Would that be your second biggest concern when it comes to competitiveness?
No, I've never made a business decision in a locational investment on the basis of tax regime. They're close enough they don't make a difference. The biggest things that we could focus on would be labor availability, and overall regulatory competitiveness.
So you've said that a few times. So overall regulatory competitiveness.
Yes.
Can you break that down for me in 30 seconds about what you would say is our weakest link when it comes to competitiveness in Canada?
The challenge with regulatory competitiveness, and I'll use a metaphor, the one that I use commonly is it's a ton of feathers. We've analyzed this on virtually every link in the value chain. There's no one item in there that's any more than a feather. You add up get a ton of feathers, it's still a ton. And the problem is that identifying any one feather almost feels trite, but it's in aggregate very significant, and we can demonstrate that on many different layers.
Thank you, Mr. McCain. Thank you, Mr. Steinley. We now have Mr. Turnbull for 5 minutes.
Well, thanks to all our witnesses for being here tonight. I'll probably focus exclusively on you, Mr. McCain. I appreciated your opening remarks and the bold vision that you have created for Maple Leaf Foods, and specifically with regards to sustainability. So I want to ask you a little bit about that and connect it to food price inflation. So would you say that Maple Leaf Foods has shifted its corporate strategy significantly in the last decade to hold itself to a higher standard when it comes to social and environmental responsibility?
Yes.
And do you think that makes you more competitive as a company?
No.
Okay, why do you say that?
If you define competitiveness as your cost competitive, the answer is no. It adds cost to our system in several areas. We've accepted that. We have a deep belief in the ethos of multi-stakeholderism, shared value creation. We embrace the magic of the word and reject the tyranny of the word or, which to us means we look to satisfy all the stakeholders and meet their needs. We reward our shareholders for our commitments to social shift by making ourselves more attractive to do more business with us at the same price, which is lucrative for the shareholders. So we have a pipeline of customers that want to do more business with us because we are who we are, even though we don't charge for most things. We do have to elevate our price for some things that we do, not the least of which is the process of raising animals without antibiotics, which is a significant portion of our portfolio, we have to pass on the additional costs.
So is there then a sustainability advantage at the very least?
Yes.
For Maple Leaf Foods? Okay.
Well, there is today, by virtue of the fact that we're small enough in the North American industry to be rebellious and large enough to commercialize our rebellious ideas. And at the end of the day, the answer is yes, it attracts more business to Maple Leaf.
Great. And I know that you've made significant efforts in reducing your carbon footprint as a company.
Correct.
I'm sure that that's had an impact on reducing your operational costs to some degree. Is that true?
Yes. Yes, it is. In that particular example, the answer is yes. So my prior comment was not exclusively true. In aggregate, it's true.
You got you. And in terms of enabling you as a company to absorb some of the inflationary pressures and shocks that we've been under, do you think that reduction in operational costs has created some added ability for you as a company to absorb those shocks?
Well, given that our profitability was down 60 to 70% through to the third quarter of last year, I think I would only factually say the answer is no. But maybe in the future.
Okay. In terms of the bold vision that you talked about, you also have been doing the Center for Action on Food Security, which has a pretty bold vision for reducing food insecurity. What are the trade-offs? You mentioned, profit margins being razor thin, a core responsibility that you saw in offering food affordably, and then this commitment to reduce food insecurity by 50% by 2030. That's a pretty tall order. So what are the trade-offs there, and how do those things interact? Can you give me a bit of an overview?
I think the plight of food insecurity in Canada and the same around the world is a very complex one. It's based on a series of interdependent root causes, and we need to find systemic answers to those root causes. They include access. They include literacy, nutritional literacy, financial literacy. They include things like mental illness, disabilities. People with disabilities are over 50% of all those that are food insecure. So there's a range of causals in addition to income and poverty, and I think that the solution is found in systemic solutions. Probably the heavy hitter is strengthening the social safety net that we have in Canada versus other jurisdictions.
We'll leave it at that. Thank you, gentlemen. Maintenant, Monsieur Perron, 2 minutes.
Mr. Perron, for 2.5 minutes. Thank you very much. Mr. Donaldson, I'd like to continue with the same line of thinking I had earlier. You exchanged with Mr. McGregor. You have some difficulties negotiating to fix prices. There are fees for unsold goods. All of those things have an impact on you. I'd like to hear what you have to say about that.
Yes, certainly, and not to repeat what was said earlier, but I did want to clarify. The code of conduct has been brought up a few times and was in our notes. It's not. I don't see it as a magic bullet for solving the food pricing issues. It's more about bringing balance to the overall food system. And right now the retailers, because of the large, you've got a small number of large customers and a very large number of small suppliers, and it just creates imbalance and it makes it very complicated. So it's honestly just when you don't have the leverage of a larger company, it's very hard to even get their attention. So one of the key issues we're finding is even just getting the attention. You'll hear from the retailer when they need you for something, but if you need something from them and need to set up a meeting to discuss some of your pricing or costs or challenges, it's usually generally don't hear back. So it's been very complicated that way. Just trying to even have that sort of collaborative dialogue to try and find sort of a mutually agreeable solution to some of the challenges.
Si je vous suis bien, Monsieur Donald.
If I understand correctly, what you're saying is that the challenges depend on the size of the business. Maybe that's why Mr. McCain was saying that a code of conduct is not necessary. More a a smaller company might not have as much leverage against if they're up with a retailer who is negotiating harder. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Monsieur Frigon.
Mr. Frigon, to finish, I think we talked a lot about the code. Is there something that you would really like to insist on? You have 10 seconds with regards to your recommendations. As James mentioned earlier, the reality is very different for factories that can only sell in Canada and those who can sell on multiple markets, including international markets. As you know, in the dairy industry, we can only sell in Canada most of the time because of supply management. And so the realities in the agri-food sector vary. Maybe others have an opinion on that. Thank you, Mr. Frigon and Mr. Perron. Now, finally, Mr. McGregor.
My friend.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Donaldson, I'd like to turn to you for this final question of mine. You know, some of the big retailers, they all sort of have their in-house brand of private products. So Loblaw, of course, has the no-name product, which was famously experienced a price freeze that didn't last very long. My own local grocer, Thrifty's, which is owned by Empire, has the Compliments brand. I guess what I'd like to hear from you is how do those in-house private brands that the retailers own, like what are your company's relationship in manufacturing those, like providing the foodstuffs to make them, and how has that affected the whole relationship that you experience with the big grocers?
Thank you for your question. It's a broad question, so I'll try to be brief. A lot of our members do provide private label products to different retailers. It becomes an important part of their business, and sometimes it's just a way to get into the store. It's also very for remaining competitive. If you have capacity, it's also a great way to fill a facility's capacity and cover its overhead costs. It has been interesting, though. We've seen a real shift with retailers, though, where we're seeing a strong and ever-growing presence of private label on their store shelves, and it's becoming a strategic priority for those retailers. And that's actually creating less shelf space for branded products that our members represent. So on one hand, it's helpful for them, and a lot of our members do play in that arena. But on the other hand, it's over the long term, we're concerned about how many its impact on branded products are going to be on shelf, because we know a lot of people that provide private label and they won't carry their branded product because they're making the private label. So now it makes them for some difficult choices.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McGregor. Thank you, Mr. Donaldson. Mr. McCain, just one question to you around the regulatory competitiveness element. You talked about, I think, 1,000 or a ton of feathers. Is the answer then to try to have some type of an element or some type of lens around competitiveness with our regulatory agencies or our bodies on the federal level? Because what I heard from the answer to Mr. Steinle was you could look at one certain area and you might pull a couple feathers out, but there's still a ton of feathers, is what you were saying. How do you alleviate that? Is it just trying to create that lens throughout multiple agencies?
I believe that to be true. I believe that that the overarching common thread, if you will, amongst all of the regulatory frameworks that we've had to deal with over many years, is to simply ask for a competitive lens that be applied, not a competitive decision, just a competitive lens to be weighed in the decision-making process. I think that would move mountains to accomplish what is a cultural and systemic issue across all of the regulatory frameworks in the country.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, thank you for our first panel, and let me thank, on behalf of all of you, our witnesses from, of course, Dairy Processors Association of Canada, Philip Vanderpool and Matthew Frigon, from Food and Beverage Canada, Mr. Donaldson, Mr. James Donaldson, I should say, and from Maple Leaf Food Incorporated, Mr. Michael McCain. Thank you for your testimony. Thank you for your work in agriculture, and very fascinating discussion. Colleagues, don't go far. We're going to transition over to our second panel, just 2 or 3 minutes, and we'll take just a minute to do that. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Much for your patience and getting everyone onboarded. We're going to start with our second panel here. We're running a few minutes late, but we'll do our best, and I'll do my best to get you caught up. Today we have three different organizations presenting. From the Competition Bureau of Canada, we have Anne Salvatore, who's the Deputy Commissioner for the Cartels Directorate. Welcome, Ms. Salvatore, to the room. We also have Anthony DeRoche, who's the Deputy Commissioner of the Competition and Promotion Branch. And we have Krista McWhinney, Deputy Commissioner of the Monopolistic Practices Directorate. Welcome to all three of you here in the room. From Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, we have Mark Shan, Senior Assistant Deputy Minister, Strategic and Innovation Policy Sector. And from Statistics Canada, joining us via video conference this evening, we have Chris Lee, who is the Acting Director of Consumer Prices Division, and Matthew McDonald, Assistant Director of Consumer Prices Division. So welcome to you online, so to speak. Each organization is going to have up to 5 minutes for opening remarks. I'm going to start with the Competition Bureau. The floor is yours.
Monsieur le Président et membres du comité, bonsoir. Je vous remercie.
Chair and members of the committee, good evening. I'm really happy to appear before you today. As you mentioned, my name is Anthony DeRoche. I'm the Deputy Commissioner of the Bureau's Competition Promotion Branch. And I'm joined today by my colleagues Anne Salvatore, Deputy Commissioner of the Cartels Directorate, and Krista McWhinney, Deputy Commissioner of the Monopolistic Practices Directorate. The Bureau is an independent law enforcement agency that protects and promotes competition for the benefit of Canadian consumers and businesses. We do this because competition drives lower prices and innovation while fueling economic growth. We administer and enforce Canada's Competition Act, which means that we investigate and address business conduct in 4 main areas: abuses of market power, anti-competitive mergers, price fixing, and deceptive marketing practices. The Bureau also advocates for pro-competitive government rules and regulations.
Concerns about high grocery prices. So on October 24th, we launched a market study of grocery store competition in Canada. This study is not an investigation into any specific allegations of wrongdoing. Instead, we are proactively looking for ways that governments can act to improve competition in the sector, because more competition means lower prices, more choice, and more convenience for consumers. We expect to publish our findings and recommendations in June. In addition to this study, we will continue to vigorously enforce the Competition Act for the benefit of all Canadians. Whenever we find evidence that someone may be doing something against the law, we will not hesitate to investigate and take appropriate action. I would note that high prices and high profits are not in and of themselves violations of the Competition Act, which sets specific criteria that the Bureau must meet when considering whether to bring a case. We are also guided by the jurisprudence from the Competition Tribunal and the courts. The Bureau conducts thorough and rigorous investigations during which we follow the evidence and make a determination as to how to proceed. Some question whether the Bureau has sufficient teeth to carry out its work. Last year, the government introduced important amendments to the Competition Act and also launched a comprehensive consultation on Canada's competition laws. This consultation is ongoing, and the Bureau will continue to push for responsible reform. We need to ensure that the Competition Act contains the right provisions and that we have the right tools to protect and promote competition in the Canadian economy. Before fielding your questions, I would note that the law requires that the Bureau conduct its investigations in private and keep the information that we have confidential. This obligation may prevent us from discussing some past or current investigations. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Durocher. We'll now turn to ISED, and Mr. Shan, over to you for up to 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, et merci à tous les membres du comité de m'avoir invité à comparer.
Thank you for having me appear before you this evening. My name is Mark Shan, and I serve as the Senior Assistant Deputy Minister in the Strategy and Innovation Policy Sector at Innovation, Science and Economic Development.
Closely associated with my colleagues at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, there's no question that food has many dimensions and is of a critical importance that cuts across departmental lines. In addition to encompassing several discrete industries and markets in the modern globalized economy, the production, transportation, and distribution of foodstuffs represent important markets, industries, and inputs in a number of dimensions, not the least of which is that they are fundamental input for all of Canada's workers, producers, and consumers, as well as a source of a tremendous amount of employment and investment that feeds our economy, less literally. It is there where my department enters the picture, focused on the rules and the resources that allow our economy to function and flourish to meet the needs of Canada's population. It's well known at this point that the causes of inflation within the food industry and elsewhere go well beyond Canada's borders. I'm sure this committee has heard much about war, weather events, and the effects of COVID-19 pandemic on consumption habits and shipping capacity that you don't need me to repeat it. Given the global nature of these phenomena, the solutions will need to be multifactorial, recognizing that many players will have to do their part to make it more manageable for Canada's population. Macroeconomic responses lie with Finance Canada and the Bank of Canada. Questions of employment are handled by the federal, provincial, and territorial departments and ministries with that portfolio. For us at ISED, we try to ensure innovative, competitive markets that deliver the best results and benefits to businesses and consumers, including affordable prices, irrespective of the overall state of inflation. Tout d'abord, j'aimerais discuter de notre rôle dans le bon fonctionnement des chaînes d'approvisionnement. La division.
First, I would like to discuss our role in well-functioning supply chains. Canada's divisions of powers prevents the federal government from simply legislating ground rules for specific industries, with the exception of the few set aside as federal areas by the Constitution. However, we have joined forces with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada to convene participants from different stages of the food supply chain to work out a code of conduct that governs their commercial relationship.
Finalized on this project, but through the hard work of the industry steering group, as well as a host of federal and provincial governments, a framework has been coming together to promote fair trading practices and contractual certainty. This will help ensure an equitable and prosperous relationship between food manufacturers and the grocers that bring their products to the public. The Code of Conduct will set out principles and clear definitions, subject to various dispute resolution and adjudication mechanisms. It will help smooth over some of the problems that have surfaced between grocers and their suppliers. It does not directly address consumer pricing, to be very clear, but the importance of stable and healthy supply chains cannot be understated in providing a competitive retail food market where customers have their choice of many different offerings at the best available price. Mon ministère assure également l'intendance de la loi.
My department also has stewardship of the Competition Act. This statute sets out a law enforcement regime to address business practices that harm competition, such as collusion among competitors, mergers that lead to undue concentration, or steps taken by dominant firms to undercut the competitive process.
As these general rules inform business behavior and can be an important part of fueling competitive dynamics. More specifically, the department at this stage does not possess evidence to confirm or refute any specific suggestion of anti-competitive activities in the food sectors, which would in any case be a matter of fact within the remit of the Competition Bureau and the courts. But Canada's grocery sector is relatively concentrated, which means that remaining vigilant and ready to respond to any threats to competition in an inflationary environment that may provide cover for unlawful activity is always top of mind. On this, the government has taken and continues to take action to reinforce our competition enforcement regime. In 2022, the Competition Act was bolstered by a series of amendments to fill gaps and bring Canada more into line with its international partners. For instance, in the wake of concerns over potential wage-fixing coordination in the grocery industry during the early stages of the pandemic, the Act was amended to ensure that agreements between different employers to collude on wages or conditions of work, thus harming competition for labour, were treated the same way that harmful price-fixing agreements were. Other amendments updated maximum penalties to make them proportionate to the benefit derived from anti-competitive or deceptive conduct, to make sure that penalties are meaningful and not simply the cost of doing business. The consumer-unfriendly practice of drip pricing, that is, hiding mandatory fees to make it harder to do accurate comparison shopping, was clarified as a deceptive practice. Numerous other targeted but important updates were made to the law for shorter-term improvement. Now, a full consultation is underway with respect to the broader, more open-ended questions of how the Competition Act should serve the modern economy.
We're going to leave it at that, Mr. Shan. Thank you. Unfortunately, we're at time. I even gave you a few extra seconds, but I know my colleagues will dig in with you at questions, and you'll have the chance to elaborate on your responses. We'll now head over to Statistics Canada, please. Either Ms. Lee or Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. Good evening, and thanks for the invitation to appear before this committee this evening. I'm Matthew McDonald, Assistant Director responsible for Consumer Prices Division, and I'm joined by Chris Lee, Director of Consumer Prices Division. Since early 2021, higher prices for gasoline, shelter, food, and consumer durables like automobiles have put upward pressure on consumer inflation. During this time, we've experienced a global pandemic, supply chain disruptions, extreme weather events, geopolitical conflicts, low unemployment, labor shortages, and higher transportations and import costs, as well as robust household demand. As inflation ramped up in 2022, Canadians reported that they were most impacted by rising food prices, followed by higher costs for transportation and housing. By mid-2022, consumer inflation had accelerated to its fastest pace in 4 decades, peaking at 8.1% in June. While the headline rate eased in late 2022, as gasoline prices fell, key sources of inflation, such as food, showed little signs of moderating. In January 2023, prices increased on a year-over-year basis in every food category, including meat, vegetables, dairy, and bakery products. Food prices have been impacted by already high production costs, such as energy and fertilizer inputs, as well as erratic weather events, supply constraints related to avian influenza, and a general dependence on imports. Canadians living across the country have been impacted by price inflation, albeit to varying degrees, depending on consumption patterns and supply chain challenges faced. From a global perspective, all G7 countries have been impacted. Compared to international peers, Canada's inflation rate has been slightly lower, including to that of the United States, and the pressures driving inflation in Canada and in other G7 nations have been occurring simultaneously and in a more pronounced manner, leading to broad-based increases in food prices across the globe. All these insights are possible as a result of Statistics Canada Consumer Price Index, or CPI, produced every month and which aligns with international standards. The Consumer Price Index tracks the changes in consumer prices for a fixed basket of goods and services of constant quantity and quality. A variety of product and regional details are published within 8 major product categories, of which the largest 3 account for more than half of the expenditure basket. These are shelter, food, and transportation. Because as collective consumers, we spend most of our money putting a roof over our heads, feeding our families, and getting around. Statistics Canada has been committed to further strengthening the Consumer Price Index and other economic indicators by leveraging more timely and higher quality alternative data sources. With regards to food prices, we are broadly leveraging scanner data, sometimes referred to as point-of-sale transaction data, with millions of food prices received directly from grocery chains across Canada. This approach is considered the gold standard among international statistical organizations in this expenditure category. In addition, the CPI has transitioned to updating baskets every 2 years to annual basket updates, meaning we update our consumer expenditure patterns annually to ensure price movements accurately reflect consumer preferences. We also continue to develop new statistical products, such as our online CPI portal and personal inflation calculator, allowing individuals to enter their own expenditures to see how their personal inflation rate differs from the averages in the CPI. As you can appreciate, the interest in our data in this high inflation environment has never been higher. We continuously work with Canadians to provide increased access to our information and improve their data literacy and interpretation capacity. Specifically, in addition to the CPI, the agency produces a complementary statistical product called the Average Prices Table. These are the data that was perceived to have been removed. These are average prices that cover many food items for a standard unit of measure and have been available historically and continue to be today. A year ago, Statistics Canada combined the national average retail prices and monthly average retail price tables to create a more comprehensive and representative product. This included the incorporation of higher quality point of sale data with improved coverage and granularity. The prior table had 52 products only available nationally and now contain 110 products available provincially and nationally. Thank you once again for the opportunity to meet with you today.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. We'll now turn to questions. Colleagues, we're going to do about 36 minutes. So we'll do the first round at 6 minutes. The second round is going to be 4 minutes for the Conservatives and Liberals and 2 minutes for the NDP and Bloc. We've had really good, robust discussion, but I think that's the best way to go. Ms. Rood, over to you for up to 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, witnesses, for appearing here today. I have been sounding the alarm for years that 80% of the grocery market in Canada is controlled by only 5 major retail grocery chains. The oligopoly of grocery industry keeps profits high while forcing farmers and producers often to sell at a loss. It's directly contributing to the death of the family produce farms in Canada. And while the Competition Bureau is familiar with the abuse of dominance, for those watching at home to understand, it is quickly put as when a company has a dominant market position and engages in anti-competitive acts with an intended negative effect on a competitor, or conduct which results in a substantial lessening or prevention of competition. So my question to the Competition Bureau, given the record profits of groceries, sky-high prices facing consumers, and increasing fees being charged to farmers just for the privilege of doing business, of selling to grocery retailers, would there be grounds for an investigation on an abuse of dominance in the grocery industry?
Thank you very much for the question. So as I stated in the opening, right now we're studying competition in the grocery sector, really with a view to making recommendations to government as to how we can enhance competition to the benefit of consumers and the economy as a whole. With respect to any investigation on the law enforcement side, such as an abuse of dominance, I think that's something that we're driven by the facts and the evidence, and will absolutely take appropriate action if we find evidence of wrongdoing, either through this study or otherwise. We have taken action in the past in the grocery sector, including a very detailed investigation into Loblaws practices with certain suppliers. And fundamentally, that's an issue where when we conclude our investigation, we provided a lot of clarity and guidance to the industry to try and draw the line between what is anti-competitive conduct, where the Bureau would take action, and where it's not necessarily crossing that line, to try and provide more clarity to the industry. But we are certainly very vigilant about any potential anti-competitive conduct.
Thank you for that. And just a question about the study that you're doing. It's not an investigation, it's a study. So therefore, is the study transparent? Are we able to access any of that prior to it being complete as you're doing the work, or do we have to wait for that to be complete?
By and large, it's waiting for a report to be published in June. Thus far, we launched our investigation in October. We do have a portal where certain parties who provided submissions in regards to our study are available to the general public to view. And we have heard from a lot of Canadians. We've heard from over 500 Canadians directly in respect to the study to hear out their concerns about what they're seeing in terms of grocery prices right now as well. But our findings and recommendations will be published in June.
Thank you. Is the Competition Bureau currently investigating the practices of large grocers for any other
Typically speaking, our studies and investigations need to be kept need to be kept private and confidential under our law. There is at least one investigation that is public at this time.
Thank you. We've heard a lot of talk about the Grocery Code of Conduct, and in the previous panel, we heard from Michael McCain say that the code would do nothing to help consumers. So I'm wondering, this is not necessarily at the Competition Bureau, but at the department. Could the department speak quickly as to what you will do to make the code actually have some teeth, to make it stick, so that it does stick and they have some repercussions if they don't follow the practice?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the question. The Code of Conduct will set principles and clear definitions, but also includes various dispute resolution and adjudication mechanisms. It's a project that's underway. It includes our colleagues over at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada as well as the industry. We've heard loudly from other parts of the supply chain that actually smaller suppliers do actually want contractual certainty, and they do actually want mechanisms to be able to engage around the practices of the retail side of the industry. And so the goal of the binding adjudication and some of the dispute resolution is to allow for those mechanisms for the industry to be able to engage across the supply chain.
Thank you. And my last question to the Competition Bureau today, as soon as we tend to see a successful group of independent grocery stores emerge. For example, we can use a local store here, Farm Boy, which started right here in Ottawa, and we tend to see big grocers come and buy these stores out. And in this case, I believe it was Empire Foods. And we have so few independent grocery stores left in this country. I think the figure is something less than 34% or so. Do you not see this as problematic for Canadian consumers, especially given the fact that big grocers have already been exposed for engaging in practices such as the bread price fixing scandal?
So with respect to our grocery market study, one of the central issues we're looking at is to try and better understand how we can lower barriers to entry and expansion at the retail level to try and facilitate new competitors, opening new stores in all areas. With respect to acquisitions and mergers in the industry, I mean, we've taken action in the past to preserve competition from that, and what I would suggest is the current consultation on the Competition Act in Canada, one of the central areas for discussion relates to our merger law and the extent to which the Competition Bureau is equipped to take action against mergers that can harm the Canadian economy.
Thank you, Ms. Rood, and thank you, Mr. Durocher. We're now going to go to Ms. Taylor-Roy, but I've neglected to mention that, Mr. Baines, you are here before our committee. It's great to have you on behalf of Ms. Valdez. Welcome to Agriculture. As you can see, it's a lively and a great committee, so welcome. And Ms. Taylor-Roy, over to you for up to 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for being here. This issue is not unique to Canada, and we've seen numerous studies being done around the world into this same issue. And I was looking over the study that you're undertaking right now and some of the issues that were raised. And I'm wondering, you say that government policy is central to driving competition. We don't hear that often, that governments can drive competition. But I'm wondering, given the studies that have been done in other jurisdictions around the world or other countries around the world, are there things you've seen coming out of those studies that other governments have done that have increased competition in those markets? Because some of these studies were done 10 or more years ago now.
Thank you. Great question. So generally speaking, government policy can absolutely drive competition in any regulated sector of the economy. Government rules and regulations play a big role in how easy it is to start up a business or expand, and goes to what a previous witness mentioned about regulatory competitiveness in Canada as well. So competition is central. Specifically with respect to what our international peers have looked at in the grocery industry. So obviously in the context of our study, we have talked to them to better understand what they looked at. Every market is unique, but there are similarities. But to give an example, one issue that we're looking at is what we call restrictive covenants, which is restrictions on the use of real estate in markets as to what you can do with that real estate. And that oftentimes can impede a new store from coming in and taking over an abandoned store as an example. So that's an issue that numerous jurisdictions have looked at, and we're currently looking at it as well in the context. And the other issue, which is common in many grocery markets, relates to the wholesale access, right? Critical for retailers to be able to source their grocery products at competitive rates to compete. So that is certainly a live issue, and it really intersects with some of the conversation around the Code of Conduct, which is separate and apart from our study.
So just quickly on the Code of Conduct, do you think that that will help increase competition?
That would certainly be our hope, that it be designed in the most pro-competitive way possible. It is separate and apart from competition law enforcement. But to the extent that a Code of Conduct can help promote transparency, predictability, and that in turn can help innovation and investment decisions to have that certainty, that can certainly be a good thing for competition. And from our perspective, I think we need to see what the final product is going to look like.
And again, do you think it should be mandatory then?
I don't think we have a view, because we haven't studied the issue in depth with respect to a Code of Conduct, because again, our role is really to administer and enforce the Competition Act. We are certainly familiar with the issues that have led to the Code of Conduct, but in terms of the debate as to whether it should be voluntary or final, that's not a specific issue that we've studied.
And going back to some of the previous witnesses we've had from the grocery chains, it's very hard to get detailed financial data in terms of specific sectors, or even looking at the grocery sector versus other sectors within their chains. And so hard to really analyze what's happening. And I noticed that was one of the limitations of the study that you mentioned as well. How do you think that can be addressed? And do you think we need to have, and I understand that most of the data you look at is confidential, do you think we need to have more teeth there so that we can actually get more granular data and see what's happening?
Thank you for the question. Yes, so that is a limitation of the Competition Bureau's ability to conduct market studies. Mm-hmm. So when we are enforcing the law and doing investigations, we're able to collect the information we need to make decisions. When we do a market study to try and inform governments and policy, we do not have that ability to collect data and information. So we're working with publicly available information or what people are giving us voluntarily. That clearly limits the depth of the work we can do and the quality of our recommendations. The solution is the Competition Act, and that is an issue that has been talked about for quite some time. I think it's live with the current consultation with respect to the Competition Act. What type of power should the Bureau have to do this work? And our respectful submission is that it is very important that we be able to compel information to properly do these types of studies, to properly inform government of our findings.
Great. And one last question. In environment, we've been talking a lot about hotspots and about vulnerable populations and how to address environmental concerns. And I'm wondering, when it comes to competition, in particular in the retail grocery sector, is there any consideration for captive customers or vulnerable populations? And I'm talking perhaps about seniors or students or people who can't travel to other areas. Is that taken into account at all?
Yes, thank you for the question. So exactly when we do an analysis of, say, retail grocers merging, it is a local market analysis. So we're really looking at specific demand, and so if there's specific aspects of the population that make them captive or vulnerable, that would go to our determination of what is a substitute and where they can travel to buy their groceries.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor-Roy.
Thank you very much.
Ms. McWhinney. We'll now turn to Monsieur Parent pour 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the witnesses for being with us. Mr. Durocher, generally speaking, if you look at the food industry, when you look at the data in general, is there a rate of competition that you think is optimal from the Competition Bureau's perspective? Thank you. Well, it depends on the industry, and there isn't really a magical threshold. What we have are guidelines for mergers. For example, we give 35% as being an indicator where we might start having competition issues. For example, if a merger or market shares go beyond 35%, but you can't contest a merger just on the basis of concentration. So it really is a sector by sector. You have to go by case by case basis. And if I recall, there are 5 major players controlling 80% of the market with regards to grocery stores. So you don't consider this to be bad for price fixing according to your guidelines. Of course, this is a very concentrated market, and in concentrated markets, you have to be more vigilant and diligent for competition and for concentration via mergers. And yes, we do have to be more vigilant in these sectors. You evaluate the competitivity of the 5 that are controlling the 80%. But if you look at the impact that might have on the relationships that small suppliers might have with these bigger companies, we looked at these practices earlier where you might have to pay to get certain points, and you can get penalized for not moving certain products. Is that something you look into? In almost every sector, we look into the consumers. That is to say, all parts of the market, and we also look at the suppliers. There really is a purchasing power that a buyer will have with suppliers. That is something that we take into consideration in the case of a merger. So with the big 5, if in the case where they would buy up independent grocers, I think Ms. Rude brought that up earlier. Does that not concern you if we would cut off a certain part of the market? And would you have the ability to block such mergers? You conduct studies, but if I'm not mistaken, you don't have much power. With market studies, that is a little bit different on how we implement the laws. With regards to fusions or mergers, in order to figure out if a merger can diminish competition, that is a legal question. The government is currently evaluating certain aspects, and I can say that at the Bureau, we are looking into making specific recommendations to improve our plan to block mergers that can harm the consumer or the market. I do appreciate this exchange. The Bureau recently published a report saying that you have less power than American institutions in order to go get that information. What we saw with the grocers is that the financial statements are quite impenetrable. And they tell us that, for example, well, they've made more profit on the pharmacy side, but not so much on the food side, and we have no way of actually verifying. So if there's one recommendation you would have in order to improve that situation, what would it be? I would say look at the concentration and the preoccupations of Canadians. They both have to do with the Competition Act. We would need more powers in order to go get that information, because otherwise we are quite limited. Secondly, we need to look at the mergers and the acts around mergers to make sure that we have the means and the proper tests to block mergers that might harm competition, especially in concentrated markets. Correct me if I'm wrong, and you'll have only 20 seconds to respond. It's not really an investigation on price fixing. It's an investigation on the situation. Some witnesses have told us that they think it's important for the Competition Bureau to investigate on how prices are fixed. What are your thoughts? You're not talking about a conspiracy per se. No, we're talking about disloyal negotiations. Well, it is something we have certainly examined in the past, especially when we investigated Loblaws because of their practices with certain suppliers. I'm sorry, Mr. Perron, your time is up, but you will have 2 additional minutes later, and you can speak with this witness later.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And thank you to all of our witnesses for appearing before our committee today. I'd like to start my line of questioning with the Competition Bureau and just sort of digging down into the differences between a study and an investigation. Now, your release did state that unlike many of its foreign counterparts, the Bureau does not have the power to compel businesses to provide such information for the study. And in the annex, you listed some of the companies, the United States, Mexico, New Zealand, and the European Union. But some of the information that you could glean from this exercise could potentially lead to an investigation. And so I guess my question is, you know, I mean, I guess there could be an instance where a company, because they're not compelled to release this information, withholds information that would be vital and may serve as the basis for you to launch an investigation. Like, how are we as policymakers to address this problem that could potentially exist?
Yeah. So certainly, if we're not able to compel information from certain parties, that does play a role in terms of you know what we can find out that could inform an investigation. I think you know the key issue that I would come back to is that our market study is not really geared to look at any allegation of wrongdoing. So we're not necessarily looking for what is could be an offense under the Act. We're looking to recommend to government how to improve competition. That said, if we come upon information that's problematic, you know, that could be grounds to further investigate. And in those instances, we would have access to more powers, such as subpoena powers, or search and seizure for potential criminal offenses. I think the key solution is looking at the Competition Act itself, and that is ripe for discussion with the government's consultation right now as to whether it would be appropriate for Canada to do like many of our peers across the world, to be able to have that information to collect power, to collect data and information to inform our studies.
Thank you. And I appreciate the recommendations that you've made. So I won't go over the same question, but so I think I get a sense of where your wants are legislatively. And of course, we do take note of the recent changes to the Competition Act. I guess I want to theme my question more on the resources of the Competition Bureau. And I want to zero in on the bread price fixing scandal. As it was in 2015 that Loblaw admitted to the Competition Bureau that it had conspired with other companies. It was 2 years later that you obtained and executed a search warrant from the Ontario Superior Court. I guess I just want to know, you know, a lot of time has passed. What is the status of that investigation? Like, is that sort of a case study that we need to look at to gauge whether the Competition Bureau has enough resources? Because I know your hearts are in the right place and that you are going to work every day in service of Canadians, but you are up against companies worth billions of dollars and with an army of lawyers at their beck and call. So that I just want to get a sense from you, you know, paint a picture of what you really are up against here.
Thank you for the question. And I can understand where you're coming from in terms of the length of time this investigation has taken, but I can confirm that this is a very active investigation. We continue to investigate all aspects of this case. It's a very complex case. There are multiple parties involved. The time period of the alleged conspiracy was quite lengthy, and so these investigations do take time. It is being investigated under criminal provisions, so we have to be vigilant. We have to be vigorous in our investigations, and hopefully, we'll come to a conclusion in a timely manner. But again, just to emphasize, this is a very, very complex case.
No, and with respect, Ms. Salvatore, I understand that, but it is 2023, and I guess. What are your internal benchmarks here for, what are your internal timelines for coming to a conclusion? I do understand it's complex, but at the same time, we do want to reach a conclusion, and there are Canadians who are expecting an answer. So if you could flesh that out a little bit more for the committee, that would be appreciated.
So again, the investigation is quite complex, and it really, that there isn't a set time period that I can point to in terms of how long these investigations take. They are really fact-specific. They really depend on how many parties are involved, the length of time of the alleged conspiracy. In this particular case, we've executed 24 search warrants over that period of time. We've collected a vast amount of evidence which has to be studied and which has to be analyzed. And if we have sufficient evidence, we will refer that evidence to the Public Prosecution Service of Canada for a decision on whether a prosecution should go forward.
Thank you, Mr. McGregor. Thank you, Ms. Salvatore. We'll now turn to Mr. Barlow for 4 minutes, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the testimony here. And I just want to get back really quick to Mr. Durocher from Mr. Perron's question. And you said that you can't, under this current study you're doing, you can't differentiate or you can't peel back the difference in the profits from pharmacy and food prices. Is that correct with the current mandate and tools you have right now?
Correct. We have to rely on public information or what is provided to us voluntarily. So we cannot compel that type of data and information, which is obviously, an important factor in assessing the role of competition with high grocery prices right now.
All right. So I guess maybe you can't answer this, but my question would be, will the study and the recommendations you provide, how accurate would they be if you're not able to dive down into that data? Or is it going to be substantial enough where those recommendations would be prudent with the information you are able to gather?
We're confident that our study is going to produce meaningful recommendations on how to improve competition. We're doing a deep dive. We're speaking to a number of parties, suppliers, retailers, big and small. We're trying to examine the role of regional competitors, why international retailers that could potentially shake up the Canadian market, why aren't they coming in? So we're confident that we're going to provide a report with meaningful recommendations. Is it as rigorous and a deep dive as we would like? No, it is not.
So certainly I had the opportunity to tour some of the produce producers and visit their farms earlier this fall. And they certainly outlined to me some of the concerns that they had dealing with the large retailers and the fees they were charged and kind of pitting one farmer against the next. But they were really hesitant to speak out against those retailers because of the fear that they would lose those contracts. As part of the study, you said you spoke to 500 different Canadians. Are you confident that you're getting frank conversations and details from those producers themselves who have been hesitant, let's say, to share the true on-the-ground stories that they're telling? Are you feeling you're getting that kind of detail?
Yeah, so I think our focus is really retail competition and looking at those issues. And we're trying to speak to the key stakeholders in that respect, including some key suppliers or industry associations representing suppliers. I think a key tenet of the Competition Act is the role of confidentiality, that people can provide us information knowing that we're going to keep that information confidential. So I think we're relatively confident that we're getting candor from parties. We're not getting full cooperation from everyone we would like in respect to the study, which is just the regime that we're operating in. But those who are cooperating, I think we're getting frank views, and it certainly is helpful.
Yeah, thanks. I just have one question for Stats Canada. Sorry, I didn't want to cut you off. To Mr. McDonald, we had a testimony earlier in this study from Dr. Sylvain Charlebois, who raised concerns about Stats Can removing historical food inflation data from the website. You had mentioned that wasn't the case. Was data ever removed from the StatsCan database, particularly on the website? Yes or no? And if not, or if it was, it's been put back up from what I understand your explanation?
No food price data has been removed from our website, and nor are there any plans to remove any data in the future. The previous average prices table that you're referring to remains online and accessible to users, and still has food prices remained available back to 1949. We did, however, make improvements to our data and expanded on the accuracy and relevance by creating more granularity and much more product detail to exploit the higher quality data sources that we now have available to us.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McDonald. Thank you, Mr. Barlow. Mr. Lewis, up to 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to all our witnesses here and online. Canadians feel unprotected by food prices. That's why we're doing this study. And we're looking to understand the high costs that people are seeing every day. Many people are feeling that grocers should be more ethical because food is a fundamental need. And I think that's at the heart of the conversation we're having. And these are important conversations. We're seeing this market, as we said, dominated by a smaller number of suppliers. So maybe I would start with the Competition Bureau. Many of the questions have already been addressed, but they deserve to be talked about. You say competition drives lower prices and innovation while fueling economic growth. Canadians are concerned about price fixing, and they come by it honestly. When we talk about the packaged bread prices artificially inflated for about 14 years, as companies communicated with each other to raise the price at least 15 times. So I understand you may not be able to comment on a specific case, and you said that for confidentiality reasons and because it's an active investigation, but I'm sure you can appreciate Canadians' concerns. You've had other inquiries into the food sector before, so can you cite some other examples, ones that you can speak about, maybe in generalities, summarize the findings, the charges requested, and let people know if those charges were implemented?
I can speak to an extensive abuse of dominance investigation that we did into certain practices that Loblaw had in place with its suppliers. This was a 3-year investigation, very, very deep dive into those policies to understand the intent behind them and the effect, because when we're looking at something under the abuse of dominance framework in Canadian competition law, we have to prove 3 things: that they are dominant, that they're acting with anti-competitive intent, and that it has had substantial lessening or prevention of competition. So during the course of that investigation, Loblaw ceased the majority of the problematic practices. Nevertheless, we felt it important to keep investigating to make sure that it had stopped enforcing those policies in all forms, but also to be able to really understand the behavior and provide guidance. So we have quite a lengthy public statement that we issued following that investigation to try to explain where in those policies between retailers and suppliers, where's the line between hard bargaining, which is not prohibited by the Competition Act, but when does it tip over into being really a retailer trying to shield itself from competition by other retailers?
Great. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. This might be a question for Mr. Sean. It's confusing to remember who answered. Talking about wage fixing, I think that would be the person. It's similar to price fixing. You've mentioned that wage fixing undercuts competition. And an easy way to think about that for the average Canadian was when representatives from Loblaws, Metro, Empire were asked why they made the decision on the same day to decrease wages, or to get rid of that wages for the frontline grocery store workers during the pandemic. How would you describe the fact that they moved in that direction, and can you describe any other examples of wage fixing that it's going to actually be in the Competition Act?
In about 30 seconds, Mr. Shan.
Yeah, so without getting into any specific instances, because that would be a matter that would be under the investigatory powers of the Bureau, I would just note the shift in law that we made in 2022, which was essentially to put potential wage-fixing coordination under the auspices of the Act. So it was ensured, the Act was amended to ensure that agreements between different employers to collude on wages or on conditions of work, thus harming competition for labor, are treated exactly the same way that harmful price-fixing agreements are. So it's a cost of input.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Thank you, Mr. Shan. Monsieur Perron, 2 minutes.
2 minutes, Mr. Perron. If I understand correctly, you have investigated on the abuse of dominance. That's where what we were more or less talking about earlier, Mr. Durocher. And if I understand correctly, Mr. Shan, you also investigate on the collusion for wages. What have been the consequences of these investigations? I don't know who would like to respond first. I can start with the changing of the law. That will take place in June 2020, this year. Changes like this, which impact the criminal articles in the law, which demonstrate that people can adjust themselves to the law. That is a law that will be coming into effect in a few months. And now we are getting ready in order to provide more information to our stakeholders on how we will apply it with a guide that we are currently preparing. There won't be any sanctions for former investigations. Is that correct? Right. It's only going forward starting June 2023. That's when that change will be implemented. Do you think that the code of conduct will attenuate some of these situations? The code of conduct will address a certain inequality and imbalance with regards to the when it comes to negotiations between suppliers and retailers. We're dealing with something a little bit different, but the code of conduct could improve transparency in the industry and provide more certainty with regards to the practices. It's very possible that it might help with regards to investments in the sector.
Monsieur McGregor.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I think my final question I will direct to Statistics Canada. In a previous meeting of this committee under the same study, we had Mr. Tyler McCann, who's from the Canadian Agri-Food Policy Institute. He came in and was informing us that Canadian researchers don't have access to the same data on agricultural and retail prices as their counterparts in the United States. And I'll just read a quote. He said, quote, "We simply do not have this level of credible, meaningful analysis in Canada. Your committee's study would benefit from an organization like Agriculture Canada, Stats Canada, or the Competition Bureau producing this level of detail. The committee should consider recommending that the Government of Canada take the steps necessary to collect data and conduct the same level of analysis that is available in the United States and to make the results of that analysis public." And I think in specific reference here, it was the United States Department of Agriculture's Economic Research Service. So I guess my question to you simply is what would be required? What is your response to Mr. McCann's comments, and what would be required for you to provide that same type of data so that policymakers could act on it?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So the majority of information that we collect is used for statistical purposes, meaning to create economic indicators that ultimately feed into measures of economic output or macroeconomic indicators. So I think what you're referring to is kind of like a regulatory framework where you would have financial information that you track entirely through the supply chain in order to be able to have these handoffs between these different sectors of the economy, which we don't really have right now. You know, we just kind of collect this information from different industries and then we aggregate it and produce it, you know, in kind of an aggregate form. So to answer your question, I think it would require a bit more of a regulatory framework to provide this information or impose this information. And, you know, really the information that we collect is safeguarded under the Statistics Act, meaning we do collect confidential information about companies, but we're not allowed to disclose that. And therefore, we only produce it in aggregate for economic indicators.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Thank you, Mr. McGregor. Mr. Durocher, I just have two quick hitters for you. Just so I'm clear, you have the legislative tool to compel evidence in investigations, but not studies. You've made very clear that the studies would be helpful. I see you nodding, so I'll take
Correct.
that as a yes. What is the threshold in order to be able to establish an investigation? Is there a legislative threshold, or is that really discretion that's held by the Bureau, or is what Ms. McWhinney was talking about, the three different factors? That's question number one. And question number two is, if you launch an investigation and the evidence that you then are able to collect because of your ability to compel, is there any preclusion from using that evidence and that information on the study down the line?
Sure. So the threshold question is, generally speaking, there's a threshold to go under inquiry under the Competition Act, which is once we're on a formal inquiry, that's when we can have apply to court for subpoena powers or search and seizure if there's a criminal offense. And basically, you need a reason to believe that an offense under the Competition Act may have occurred. So you really need grounds. You can't just think that something is amiss. It's a concentrated sector. So you really need evidence to substantiate why we think that we need to compel information. So it's an important threshold. In terms of using the information that we obtain, it's really case by case. There are considerations between civil and criminal issues that we take into account. So in all cases, I think we're informed by the legal advice from our counsel with the Department of Justice as to what is the appropriate way to use the information that we obtain.
And nothing from a legislative slide that would require further clarification on what you can and can't do on that side, or it would just be the general principles of evidence from criminal law and civil matters from lawyers?
Yeah, correct. I think in the context, our respectful submission is the legislative issues are live before the Competition Act right now, and ability to compel from market studies is ripe for this issue, and also just merger law in general, and the ability for the Bureau to tackle anti-competitive mergers is a central issue in the consultation right now.
Thank you, colleagues, for the small indulgence. Thank you to our witnesses. On behalf of all of you, our committee, to the folks at the Competition Bureau, thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for being here today. To Mr. Shan with ISED, and indeed to our folks online with Statistics Canada. Thank you so much. Colleagues, good night. I'm told to hit this hammer to say that we're done. Great.